Welcome everyone to PolitiFest 2020. I'm Adriana Heldes. I'm a multimedia producer at Voice of San Diego. In case you aren't aware of who we are a nonprofit news organization committed to holding public officials accountable and giving you, the public, the tools you need to be advocates for the public good. As a nonprofit, we depend on members and donors like yourself to make our work possible. So thank you for being here and for supporting us. We'd like to take a minute to recognize some of our sponsors, the Google News Initiative for sponsoring the creation of this virtual event, the College of Arts and Sciences at USD for underwriting all student tickets, the San Diego Foundation for sponsoring our community conversations. And also thank you to Cox Communications, SDG&E, the Atlantis Group, the City of San Diego Retired Employees Association, the City Heights Community Development Corporation, the San Diego County Democratic Party, and Business for Good, which is sponsoring this debate right now. PolitiFest runs through noon Saturday, October 3rd, and you can check out the full schedule at politifest.org. Several of our sessions are going to be free throughout the event, as well as some of them will be both available in English and in Spanish. And the recordings of all sessions will be available on our website by the next day. So if you have any questions for our panelists, you can check out the chat box below this video. If you're not logged into YouTube, it's very easy to do so by just using your Gmail account. You have to be logged in order for you to comment or to send in a question. You can also tweet along with the session and share your experiences by using hashtag PolitiFest2020 on social media. So with all of that being said, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Lisa Halverstadt, and she'll take it away from here.
Thank you, Adriana, and thank you for joining us tonight for the District 3 debate. Again, I'm Lisa Halverstadt, and I'm actually sitting here in District 3, where I am a resident, and I have covered many City Council District 3 issues over the years, and I'm really excited to talk to the two candidates tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on first Toni Duran, who has worked in District 3 as a staffer for State Senator Toni Atkins. Welcome, Toni. Thank you. And also Stephen Whitburn, who leads development efforts for the SoCal American Cancer Society and has been engaged in District 3 for many years. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. So I think I'd like to start with perhaps the toughest question here. We'll get that out of the way. So, you know, obviously we're here in the middle of one of the worst public health crises that we've ever had as a nation. And that has meant that our city budget is not looking so hot. The city recently actually projected a $300 million budget hit associated with reduced tax revenue during the pandemic. So, you know, of course, that revenue covers a lot of city services. So first off, why do you think you're best suited for this job in this time? And honestly, why do you want this job when you would be coming in at such a difficult time? And I'll start with Toni.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for the question. Thank you for everyone for attending tonight. To answer that question, I mean, why wouldn't you want to be the representative for District 3? I mean, sorry, all the other districts, but we're kind of best. But, you know, we, just like you said, we're facing a $300 million deficit with our own city budget. The state budget itself this year faced a $54 billion deficit. And one of the reasons why I am qualified to take this position is I have worked in the state office, in the Assembly and the Senate, under 7 different budgets, under 2 different governors. I've seen how each one of them approaches the budget. I've seen how Governor Jerry Brown, how I would say maybe how tight with the purse strings he was, made it possible for us to have such a large rainy day fund that made it possible for us to survive financially, our state to survive financially during this crisis. And I've been working full time since all this started. I talk with people every day about the issues that they're facing, whether they're a business owner, a landlord, a small business, just a regular person on living their life, trying to figure out how they're going to pay their rent and their mortgage. I've been having these conversations with them for the past 6 months for that specifically. So I want to continue to represent the residents of District 3. I want to continue to help do big things and better things with our folks here in not just the district, but throughout the entire region. And I'm ready to jump in come beginning of December and continue that work with our existing council members and whoever our new mayor will be.
Stephen?
Well, Lisa, the reason I want to do this is because I have lived in this city for a long time. I love it here. We live in a beautiful place. I mean, you live in District 3. Look at it. We've got vibrant neighborhoods. We have a bustling downtown. We have iconic Balboa Park. There's so much to love about District 3 and about San Diego, but we obviously have challenges that we need to solve. Homelessness has gotten worse. Housing prices are out of control in some areas. Look at the condition of our streets and sidewalks. We have an awful lot of work to do, and I'm really looking forward to making a difference and getting a lot of this done. Obviously, right now, one of the biggest challenges we face around COVID-19, as you mentioned, not only the health effects that so many people have suffered through, but also the economic devastation. So many people have really encountered economic disaster as a result of this. And I'll tell you, Lisa, the reason why I am best suited is because I actually have a plan for how we're going to address this. We need to address it in a short-term way, a medium-term way, and long-term. Short-term, when it becomes safe, we need to help our small businesses reopen. I think the city has done a lot of good things in terms of loosening up permits so that businesses can open up outdoors and begin to serve customers. We also need to increase tourism. I mean, those out-of-town dollars coming into San Diego will be a big boost to our economy. So we need to do those things in the short term. Medium term, we really need to facilitate construction. We've got a lot of construction going on downtown and in other parts of District 3. Those are good paying jobs. We need to encourage those. We've got a lot of projects that are waiting to start building, and we need to get those started. And long term, we need to grow the economy. And there are a lot of ways that we can do that. And District 3 is a big part of that. Downtown, we're looking to attract more and more tech jobs and life sciences jobs. Horton Plaza is being converted to tech offices. Those will be good paying jobs coming in. We just saw in the news that the Pacific Gateway project, the Old Navy Broadway complex, 5 blocks along the bay are going to be converted to life sciences office. More good jobs, more economic boost for downtown, District 3, and our entire city. And that's what we need to facilitate. I know what we need to do, and I'm looking forward to getting it done.
So here's the tough follow-up question to that. We've talked about maybe things that we want to fund, right, or to help. But obviously, this crisis that we're in also means that the city's likely to have to make some really tough budget cuts. So what will you prioritize, and where would you potentially, take a look at cuts? And we'll start with Stephen this time.
Well, I'm not sure that we're going to have to go the way of cuts. With the crisis that we have had so far, the city has largely managed to avoid significant cuts. That's in part because of financial discipline. It's in part because of the federal stimulus dollars that we have received. I hope that after the incoming election, the upcoming election, that more federal stimulus and state stimulus dollars will be forthcoming. But even if they're not, I think that with the economic growth that we can achieve by getting more people back to work in small businesses, in tourism, in construction, and long-term growth, that we can actually grow our economy and avoid those kind of cuts.
Toni?
Yeah, so we have to stay focused on our priorities in the short term to begin with. And we're talking about our values, like making sure that we have funding for our recreation centers, our parks, and our libraries, making sure that we have money available to make sure that we have safer crosswalks, sidewalks, street resurfacing. We're talking about street lights and bike lanes. These are the everyday quality of life issues that we're talking about. We've been able to continue to look at funding and have funding for these items, and we need to be really smart about where we're investing our funds in the short term. That way, in the long term, we know that we're still working towards addressing climate change. So we're putting the funding into taking care of our climate action plan. We have the plan, we just need to take that action. Make sure that we have great transit options and we have them expanded, and that we're really investing in our neighborhoods and our quality of life. And it's going to take us some time to build that budget back up. It's going to take some time before we get those tourism dollars back in, which is where San Diego gets so much of its money for the budget. We're probably not going to see that tourism for a while. I just had a friend of mine who traveled out of state, and he now has tested positive for COVID because he got it on the airplane. So short-term quality of life issues, and then but still with that eye on the future.
So before we go to the next question, I just want to invite everyone who's tuning into this to please, in the comment section, ask questions, suggest questions that we should be discussing today. And also would love to hear from you about what the candidates have to say about some of these issues. So the next thing I definitely want to hit today is when the city council went through its budget process this year, it got an avalanche of calls from residents who were calling for police cuts in light of a lot of the recent, unfortunate events that have been in the news. And council members took a lot of heat for not, according to those residents, responding, in the way that they were hoping, not making as dramatic cuts, the dramatic cuts that some folks were calling for. We'll start with Stephen in this case. Stephen, what would you advocate in terms of reforms or cuts for the police department?
Well, there are a number of reforms that we need to make. One of the things that we need to do is shift some of the services out of the police department and into social services. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Right now, the police department, in many cases, is the first point of contact, reaching out to people who are unsheltered. And really, for many of the unsheltered, that's intimidating. And it's not as helpful as it would be to have somebody approach them who's with social services, who can really outline the options that are available to them. So I would like to see the county play a bigger role with stepping up and having social services be the front lines in reaching out to people who are homeless. The county supervisor who represents this area, Nathan Fletcher, has been a big proponent of that. He's endorsed me. He calls me the partner he needs on city council. And between the county and the city, I think that we can do a lot in terms of steering some of the people who are homeless and on the streets into services. Mental health is another area where police are oftentimes on the front lines, and it would be better handled by folks in social services and mental health expertise. Of course, there's a wide range of police reforms that we need in addition to those. I have endorsed Measure B, which calls for an independent task force on independent commission on police practices. We need to get that implemented. We need to hire an executive director with experience in this. We need to hire commissioners who represent the diversity of our communities, assuming this passes. We have the Office on Race and Equity that just went through the City Council. I'll be part of implementing that. We need to make sure it's fully funded and given the opportunity to really break down racial inequities in the city of San Diego, which continue to this day.
Toni?
Yeah, so when we are looking at what jobs are we asking our law enforcement officers to do that really aren't the jobs that they should be doing? We need to stop policing our unhoused neighbors. We need to stop policing folks that are having mental health issues. We need to have more of that funding that's been put into the overtime that the police are working, because they're being called to so many jobs that are not theirs to do, that they don't have the training to do. We have so much money going into overtime for that. That money could be put back into investing in our communities, investing in mental health workers, investing in folks that can work one-on-one with our unhoused neighbors. We really have a lot of work to do to rebuild the trust in our communities with law enforcement officers. We have been talking a lot about things as simple as pretext stops. The fact that this is still a practice, even though folks like Jerry Sanders, our former mayor and former police chief, have said that these need to stop. Without the trust being rebuilt with our communities, the budget for police force, for police officers, law enforcement officers, however you want to refer to them, there's always going to be a big question mark there. And I want to take the jobs away that they should not be doing. I want these folks to be focusing on making sure that we're safe, that we're all safe, because we all need to feel and know that we are safe. And like I said, rebuild the trust, put that money back into the communities for libraries, after school programs, support services. There is so much that we can do, and it's not making us less safe. It's not getting rid of our police force. It really is making sure that issues are taken care of before we even get to those places.
So I want to ask another question about a lot of the racial justice situations that I think many folks are becoming more aware of in our country these days, and others have direct experience with. I've noted that both of you have talked about how you have marched in racial justice protests recently. And I'm curious, we can start with Toni in this case, what have you learned from what's happened recently and in the current events, and how has your experience marching shaped your thinking around potential reforms or your approach to policing in the city?
Yeah, so I've been out. I think we all know about the photo that Adriana took right here in North Park. I was actually up on the bridge, at the top of the bridge, when she was down below getting that picture. We've seen so many folks come out of their homes and participate in these protests. We have known that systemic racism, racial injustice, we have known that these issues have been around for over 400 years. And it took a global pandemic forcing us to stay at home, forcing us to pay attention, for finally more people to come out and say, hey, that's not right. So part of it is we are seeing and trying to teach people how to use their privilege to speak out against racial injustice, to speak out against brutality that we've seen across the nation. We have seen that more people are asking questions. We have seen how our criminal justice system is been built really to bring down lower income folks and people of color. There's a gentleman that's been in jail with a bond that's greater than somebody who has committed murder because he was protesting. We have community activists, young Black women who have been doing incredible work for their community, that have been arrested, that have had their medications taken away from them, that have had their personal phones taken away from them and not given back. Why is this happening? So I've seen a lot more people stand up, but I've seen a lot more people that have really surprised me that don't actually believe that Black lives matter. And I'm here to say Black lives matter, brown lives matter, transgender lives matter. We have to change, period.
Stephen?
I've been working on racial justice issues for a number of years. I was vice president of the American Civil Liberties Union of San Diego and Imperial counties. So I was proud that District 3 was the home to the largest protests in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. There were so many thousands of people on multiple occasions marching through the streets, and I was proud to join them. I was pleased to be one of those who shut down the 5 freeway to really make a statement and let everybody know how San Diego is opposed to what happened in Minneapolis and what has happened far too often around the country. As to what I have learned, I have seen a shift in the way the San Diego Police Department has handled these protests. And I think that it's a shift for the better. During the initial protests, we saw a lot of police in riot gear with their batons. We saw rubber bullets. We saw what many people felt was an intimidating approach. And as time has gone on, and in reaction to public feedback, I've seen several occasions now where that riot gear is no longer present, where people are not feeling as intimidated. So I want to encourage that. I think that we need to encourage the police department to de-escalate, encourage the police department to allow peaceful protesters to continue to stand up for racial equality. We're not there yet, and we need to do more.
Toni, it looked like you had some thoughts on that quickly. Would you like to share what you were, it seemed like you had something to say.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Now I see it. We're still having people arrested, and that young woman I was talking about that was recently jailed, she talked about how people were beaten. And so we may not be seeing something because we're not out there or we're not watching the right Twitter feeds or Facebook Live, but I am still seeing our own residents out there on the streets, and I am still seeing and hearing the stories about the violence that they're seeing against protesters. It may not be happening as much, but it's still happening, and it's infuriating, but it's also scary. There have been times where I have not gone out to participate in the protests because honestly, I'm scared of what might happen to me.
Oh, make no mistake. Sure. I mean, make no mistake. I mean, we've got a ways to go, as I said, and there was a protest down outside the police headquarters the other day, and a lot of people felt like they were not treated the way they wanted to be treated. But when you see an initial protest with police in riot gear and batons and using non-lethal means that can still inflict a lot of harm, and we've gotten away from that, at least to some extent, I want to be the one who is encouraging that, saying that is the direction we need to go. Let's go all the way there and be the kind of city that supports people's right to protest. Let's do that.
So I'd like to shift gears a bit on, something that has long been a District 3 issue, but certainly a citywide and region-wide issue as well, and that is homelessness. So it seems to me like light years ago now, but last fall, the city approved a homelessness plan. The city council unanimously approved it, and it called for about 2,800 new permanent supportive housing units and some reforms to the homeless service system. We'll start with, I think last time we started with Toni, so we'll start with Stephen on this one. Do you support the plan? And if so, what would you do to implement it? And if you have concerns, what are those?
I do support the plan, Lisa. We have a moral obligation to help our brothers and sisters who are suffering on the streets. It's a quality of life issue in our neighborhoods as well. I live downtown, so I see this tragedy every day and everywhere I look. Sometimes I'll get into a conversation with some of my unhoused neighbors, and I was talking to a gentleman down by Petco Park 2 weeks ago, and he said to me, "Don't forget about us." Well, I certainly won't forget about him. I won't forget about any of the folks who are unhoused. In fact, addressing homelessness is going to be my top priority as a council member. There are so many things that we need to do. You mentioned the framework that was adopted last fall. The city of San Diego had gone for years without a comprehensive plan to address homelessness, despite the fact that the problem was getting worse and despite the fact that we obviously needed one. I've been calling for years for a comprehensive plan. I was glad to see that we got a framework adopted last fall. The three housing planks of it, I think, are exactly right. We need rapid rehousing, basically prevention, finding ways to keep people in their homes when they're at risk of losing them, short-term shelter, as well as long-term permanent supportive housing. But one of the things that that plan also called for that sometimes hasn't gotten as much attention as the housing elements is the coordination of services. And that is key because what we have had in San Diego for so many years is wonderful nonprofits doing great work, many of them addressing specific populations of people who are unhoused or specific elements of the problem, but not so much in a coordinated way. And one of the things that we've seen this year with the thousands of people who have stayed at the convention center and the shelter there, with that many people and government agencies and nonprofits involved, we have seen a coordination of services like we haven't seen before. And that has resulted in hundreds of people who've been at the convention center ending up in homes. We need to continue that. We need to, as long as that convention center shelter is open, be steering people and coordinating services and getting people into housing. When that convention shelter closes eventually, which it will, we need to get them into other homes as well. And I think that the city is taking the right approach by using state dollars to purchase inexpensive hotels, which will provide hundreds of rooms for people who are homeless. And in addition to that, we have the short-term shelters that are going to be opening. Alpha Project, we've got Path, we've got Golden Hall, which will be reopening as a shelter with appropriate social distancing. So if we continue to coordinate services, if we continue to add housing, we will solve long-term widespread homelessness in San Diego the way it is today. And I'm committed to making that happen, and I will.
Toni? You're muted.
I keep checking now, the little mic. COVID-19 has brought so many additional issues to light. It also helped us really redirect funding so we can address homelessness in a greater way. The plan that was brought forth in front of City Council last year proved that services are essential to end the cycle of homelessness, and that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. So having rapid rehousing, emergency housing, permanent supportive housing, everything under the sun to help address individual needs is what we need to do. And the fact that we were able to get the convention center opened to address the needs of some of our unhoused neighbors was incredible. It was done relatively quickly, and then the fact that we have folks on site that are working with these people every day to help address the issues that they're facing. We found out that something like 525 of those individuals now are in permanent housing. And because of COVID-19, we had at the state level what was called Project Room Key, where folks that were at higher risk of contracting the virus that were unhoused, they could get into hotels, so they could have that housing. And now that has turned into Project Home Key, and we have two former hotels that are going to be converted into housing. We have the funding approved from the state, and this will give it'll address 336 units of housing for folks that have been experiencing homelessness. But we also need to talk about reallocating and putting more money into service outreach workers, putting more money into mental health care, substance abuse care. We've got I just drew a blank. Sorry, I totally forgot what I was going to say. I get really passionate about this because I have folks that I talk to when I used to walk to my phone banks or go to the grocery store. I talk to people every day. I have a woman that I was helping that she was homeless. She was living in her car. She was a transplant patient and she was waiting on her unemployment. And she was trying to stay one step ahead from the person that was trying to repossess her car. And these are huge issues that we're facing. And there are 150 different things we can do to help. First of all, we need to pass Measure A. So make sure that you're voting yes on that, and we will build more housing. Because these are people's lives that we're talking about. I hate when we just say the homeless. These are our unhoused neighbors. And it's our duty and our responsibility to help take care of them.
And just a heads up for everybody watching, I'll actually be moderating a panel next on Measure A if you'd like to learn more about that property tax proposal. One thing that I definitely wanted to ask both of you as well is historically the District 3 council member has really become sort of a regional leader and city leader when it comes to homelessness issues. So the previous 2 council members have actually served as chair of the Regional Task Force on the Homeless, the regional group that sort of coordinates the homelessness response. We'll start with Toni on this one. What role would you like to play? Would you like to be a regional leader on this issue? And what would you do with that post if you were to take that on?
And Lisa, I think that that's true because we see a greater amount of folks living in District 3 that are unhoused. We have a lot of folks that the services are downtown, which is in District 3. And honestly, I don't need to be a leader, like the game changer on anything. It's every city council member's duty and the mayor's duty to make sure that we are addressing these issues. We should all be leaders in this fight. We need to have services all throughout the city, not just in downtown, not just in certain areas. We have to have services where folks are that are experiencing homelessness. And if that means that me as the council member for District 3, that I take the lead on that, absolutely, let's do that. But I will be leaning on every single, the other 8 council members and the mayor to do that work with me. Because it's not one person that needs to lead the charge, it's all of us. We all have to be in it 100%.
Stephen?
Well, we're having a little bit of an earthquake right now, which is a little interesting. But so as to the question, yes, I mean, District 3 is the epicenter of our homelessness crisis. And we absolutely need the council member of District 3 to be the leader on this issue. I actually have a different perspective on this than my opponent. I think that the residents of District 3 want and expect their council member to take the lead on homelessness on a region-wide level in San Diego. It is that important from a moral perspective to the people who are currently unsheltered. It is that important as a neighborhood issue to the many people who live here. So yes, I will want to serve as the head of the regional task force on the homeless. I will want to work with our nonprofit community, our small business community. As I mentioned, Nathan Fletcher, who is the supervisor for District 4, which includes this area, is very much about addressing homelessness. And he and I will work together. He's endorsed me. And it's going to take that kind of collaboration and teamwork to finally address homelessness, which is what I'm very committed to doing.
So let's also talk about housing issues. It's obviously something that every council member would be dealing with, but in District 3, certainly, as we talk about homelessness and housing being connected, but also, certainly every resident of San Diego is aware of our housing price situation. Last week, the Historic Resources Board of the city made a controversial call to declare the former Mission Hills Library historic, which ended the possibility of affordable housing there. And certainly, there are many calls for increased affordable housing. There's a ballot measure up to try to produce more affordable housing. What do you think is the right approach to trying to produce more housing that's both affordable to people who are low income, but also people who are middle income? And how do you ensure that if you believe that that's the right thing, that housing gets distributed in different neighborhoods? We'll start with Stephen on that one.
Well, sure. I mean, I have known a number of people who lived in San Diego and ended up moving because they could no longer afford the price of housing in San Diego. And that's sad. It's sad to see it when people leave a wonderful city like this because the cost of housing is so high. It's the people who live here that make the city as wonderful as it is. So we've got to increase housing affordability. And we've got to do both increasing affordability in terms of income restricted affordable housing that is affordable to very low and low income San Diegans, but also housing that's affordable to working professionals in many cases, the moderate income housing that you were referring to. The San Diego Housing Commission has worked very hard to preserve affordable housing that is existing currently in San Diego, as well as creating new affordable housing. But we're not producing enough. So what I would recommend and what I want to explore is looking at what other cities have done quite successfully, and that is providing property tax incentives for the creation of affordable housing. We see this in Portland, we see this in Seattle, New York City does this, Minneapolis does this, where if a builder includes more affordable housing than is required, they get a property tax break. That ends up being good for the city because they get those affordable housing units built. It's good for the builder. And of course, it's good for the people who need it. So we need to all work together to increase affordable housing. I think all of our neighborhoods have a responsibility to participate in that. And that'll be another top priority for me as a city council member.
Toni?
Reports came out that, reports came out that median income in the city of San Diego is $92,700, and you're considered low income if you make $64,700 or less, which would make me low income. And I have a pretty good job. I have stable employment, what's been the best income I've had since I've lived in San Diego. But I also know that I've had to move 9 times in 12 years just to find an apartment to rent or a room to rent that I can afford. And part of it is because our housing stock is so low that people can pick and choose, who gets to live there or how much they're going to charge. We have a tendency to build, but when we're building, it's a higher range, these luxury condos and luxury apartments. I have my friends Caroline and Bob in Normal Heights. They talk about how they were able to buy their home because they had help from their parents, but they worry about whether or not their 2 kids are going to be able to stay in San Diego when they grow up because of how expensive housing is. So the more housing that we build, we increase that housing stock, and we're addressing the lower income housing and the middle income for our working class. We're talking about our nurses and our teachers, and just regular folks like me. The more we build that type of housing, the more we're not going to have to worry so much about how high the rent is. We need to be using publicly owned land to build housing, where we can make that determination too, what we're going to build. I was a big proponent to have the old Mission Hills Library become permanent supportive housing. When I was out knocking doors in Mission Hills, I talked with people about, they were opposed to it, but what do we do to make you more comfortable? What kind of housing can we build there to make you more comfortable? Because it has to get built. We need to be removing red tape for building. We need to the permitting fees for ADUs. We need to either waive them or significantly reduce them. We need to be better partners with not just city, but city, state, local, federal, to make sure that we're getting the funding that we need to build in our neighborhoods and build more along the transit lines, but also make sure that we have the transit ahead of time to address the fact that we need more housing along transit. So it's a matter of having those conversations with our communities about what type of housing we are going to build there, but be clear that we do need to build housing.
So it's sort of a follow-up to that, but for both of you to answer, as he's preparing to leave office, Mayor Kevin Faulconer has been pushing major housing reforms that would make it easier for developers to build tall buildings with more rent-restricted units in them near transit. We can start with Stephen, but do you support that? And do you think that there should be more density or more dense developments near transit to also help achieve some of the city's climate action plan goals?
Well, I'll take those as two different questions because, yes, we absolutely need to add density, particularly near transit, to achieve our climate goals and to achieve our housing goals. And downtown is an example of where we're adding a lot of housing. It's the transit hub for San Diego. We can build up to many stories here, and that's appropriate. So I'm very strongly supportive of that. The plan that the mayor has put forward, the Complete Communities Plan, I think is being put forward rather expeditiously during a time when public comment is somewhat limited because of the COVID-19 crisis. I think that there are a lot of people who would like to have had more input on the front end of that, and I think that we ought to allow for that. So I would like to see that plan and the specifics included in it be further vetted and have more public input. But in terms of the overall general goal of the plan, which is to increase housing density around transit, yes, I strongly support that.
Toni?
Yes, we need to build more housing around transit. We also, yes, we will have increased density, we'll have higher height limits, but we also have to remember too that a height limit that we're going to see in University Heights isn't going to be the same as what we see downtown. Every neighborhood has a difference, and we're not just talking about flight plans either. But you know, the fact that because of this pandemic, the ballot measure we're going to have in November with MTS to increase transit, increase bus lines, increase green buses, that's being delayed for at least another year. Part of the issue is that we keep talking about building around transit, yet we haven't built the transit or increased the transit that we need to address the issues that people tell us every day that they have with the fact that we want to build along transit lines. So we need to be working on this together, not just saying we need to build and then we need to do the transit. We need to have that ready while we're building to bring down the anxiety that many folks in our neighborhoods have about, you keep saying you're going to do this, but there's no parking as it is, or what about fires in our canyons? These are they're such important issues. There's so much to address, but I can't say enough. We have to build that additional housing for our lower and our middle income folks.
So I'm going to have one last question for you all before we open it up. We've got some questions from folks that are tuning in here. But I just think that a District 3 City Council debate would not be complete without a question about Balboa Park. So I think that there's now pretty much universal agreement that the park needs more money and funding to ensure it can thrive over the long haul. It's got a long list of needs. We'll start with Toni on this one. How should the city support those sorts of improvements? Would you potentially back a bond or some sort of other tax increase to fund repairs and other needs at Balboa Park?
Well, one of the things that we talk about a lot is the fact that Penny for the Arts just never went through. Here's a promise that the city made to our arts and culture groups, saying 1 penny of our taxes, we're going to go back to arts and culture to address that. We have San Diego Zoo I think they get 2 cents, I believe, from personal property taxes, we have the
I'll
funding
share a
there.
story that I wrote about this actually. Of our,
It's there, and the fact that we do this, it's the phrase of the day, kick the can down the road. We've kicked so many cans down the road. There's just a mountain of cans in front of us that we cannot climb over. And what we have to do, it's going to take time, but we just have to start removing can by can by can, because we're not going to get anywhere if we don't start somewhere. So we need to make sure that Penny for the Arts is implemented fully. We need to reach out to philanthropists to help us. There are folks that want to help. They just need that ask. We have, through the budget process, we were able to get money into the state budget to address some infrastructure issues in Balboa Park. When we get that funding back from the state, you better believe I'm going to be going back to my state senator and my state assembly member to ask them for more of that funding. Down the road, I think putting something on the ballot, putting a bond out there, something like that would be options to look at. It's so hard to say right now because we're in the middle of this pandemic. We see changes week to week, month to month. We're not sure where funding is going to come from. That's why we need to keep having innovative thoughts, have more folks in on the conversation, and move forward with that. When the mayor talked about in the budget that he was cutting a lot of money from arts and culture, they immediately put up a website where people could start donating. So sometimes it takes little steps here and there, but if we don't take a step forward, we're not going to get where we need to go.
Stephen?
Lisa, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of deferred maintenance in Balboa Park, and we have had that situation for many, many years, and we have not addressed it, and it has only gotten worse. We need a new approach, and a new approach is what I want to bring. Balboa Park is one of our area's major tourism attractions. People come to Balboa Park from all over the world, and one of the reasons is because it's attractive. And if we start to lose the luster of the attractiveness of Balboa Park, we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot. Sandag recently released a regional transportation plan. And one thing that is included in that regional transportation plan is trolley service around the perimeter of Balboa Park. Well, they want to bring more people to Balboa Park and the neighborhoods around it. Part of Sandag's mission is to increase transit ridership. So it would seem to me that Sandag, if it wants to increase transit ridership, if it wants to increase ridership to Balboa Park, would have a vested interest in wanting to ensure that Balboa Park is as attractive as it can be. The plan that they're talking about is $177 billion. The deferred maintenance in Balboa Park is just a fraction of that plan. I would like to have a conversation with Sandag and see if there is a nexus whereby, as part of its transportation plan and encouraging people to use transit and coming to Balboa Park, we can have that plan address some of the deferred maintenance that we have in the park.
So, Toni, did you have, I can't hear you.
It's my understanding that Sandag actually can't change where that funding goes. So while it would be great to dip into those billions of dollars, it's my understanding that they're actually not able to reallocate any of that funding outside of what the plan already is.
Well, the plan hasn't been passed yet. So until the plan has been passed, there are no firm allocations, and my goal is to get this included in the plan.
So, related question from the audience here. We'd like to have some of their questions here answered. So, this is a question from William, and it's related to this issue a bit. His question is, what are the candidates' strategies for advancing and improving transit? And he specifically notes the scheduling and availability of transit so that it's more convenient than a car. We can start with Stephen in this case.
Sure. I think that there are an awful lot of people who would take transit if it were more convenient. I think there are so many people who see the value of transit, who see the convenience of transit if it operated frequently enough, and if it got to your destination more or less comparably with the amount of time it takes to take a car. But we're nowhere near that point. So we have to increase the frequency of our transit. We have to increase the destinations, the places you can go on transit, and we need to increase the speed with which it gets there. And those are the sorts of things that the regional transportation plan would address, and that we absolutely have to accomplish. We have a climate action goal in the city of San Diego that is one of the best climate action plans in the nation, and we have to fund it. We have to achieve those goals, and if we do, we'll make some significant progress both on the environment and on transit.
Toni?
So we have a rapid bus line, a rapid bus lane on El Cajon out here in District 3. Having more of those throughout the city would help with the time it takes to get from one spot to another. The fact that MTS has also reduced the amount of stops, reduced the amount of time that certain buses run. There are some folks that they work on the weekends, they work late at night, they work overnights, and they can take a bus to get to work, but then they have to wait several hours until there's a bus ready again to take them back home. We need to have buses, trolleys, other forms of public transit like that running at all hours of the day. We can't shut it down. We can't ask people to ride transit, but then not give them the ability to do it when they need to do it. So increasing the times that it's running, increasing the amount of buses that we have, increasing the amount of green buses, especially that we have. I very rarely see that green bus go through. I'll see it come down Washington and down University, but not nearly enough. I know when I lived in Normal Heights and I was taking the bus just to go downtown, it took an hour. It shouldn't take an hour to go from Normal Heights to downtown on public transit. So we can't be cutting the times that they run. It needs to run all the time.
So next question comes from Marilyn. She would like to know if you all support Proposition 15. This is a state ballot measure that would create a split roll property tax system and spend the revenue increase on education and other public services. Toni, would you like to start on this one?
Yep. Simple answer, yes, I support it.
Stephen?
Yes, absolutely.
Another quick one. This is also from William, but I'm not sure if it's the same William that asked the earlier question, but it's a quick one since we're time limited. Stephen, do you support the Housing First model?
Yes.
Toni, do you support the Housing First model?
Yes, that one, that model along with several others, because like I said, there's no one size fits all, and every single type of housing that we can address for folks that are experiencing homelessness, we need to.
And just a little background for those who are watching, Housing First essentially means that instead of requiring homeless individuals to necessarily seek services before they connect with housing, you instead provide the housing up front or more quickly, and then offer the services as well. So essentially not making a requirement and making housing a more central part of the solution there. Let's see, I'm going to see if we could fit in one more question here. Looking at our list here. Let's see, I will ask a question very quickly. We have just a couple minutes. This question from Carlos. He says, some residents in District 3 frequently talk about preserving neighborhood character, a statement that some view as racist. He writes that Ms. Duran has rightfully pushed back on this. What is Mr. Whitburn's view? Stephen?
Well, I mean, neighborhood character, means whatever the person who is saying it means. There are people who will invoke neighborhood character to try to prevent any sort of additional development in their neighborhood. There are people who will invoke neighborhood character as a means of advancing redlining and all sorts of awful practices that we have had. So to the degree that neighborhood character is trying to prevent additional housing, to the degree that it is trying to prevent diversity, I strongly oppose that. But we also have some neighborhoods with a lot of wonderful character in District 3. We have historic homes, we have all kinds of history. And so for many people who enjoy their neighborhood and enjoy their neighborhood character, that can mean something very positive.
Toni, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, just like Carlos said, historically, the quote unquote neighborhood character ties right into racism, systemic racism. That's where redlining was built from. So when folks talk about preserving their neighborhood character, my answer to that is that that's perfectly fine. I will make sure that we're not building something ultra modern next to a historic home.
Well, thank you both. I'm afraid we have to wrap it up. I have so many more questions I would love to ask you both, but thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's been a pleasure. And thanks to everybody who has joined us.
Yes, thank you very much to all who tuned in tonight.
Lisa, you've got my Twitter and my email. Send me those questions.
Stephen, are you up for that too?
You bet. That's what I do. I answer questions. That's what I'm here for.
Okay. Well, thank you both.
Thank you, everyone, again for joining us. Yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. You can find the next session on our event site. If you get lost, just head back to politifest.org. Again, that's politifest.org. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for everyone for coming into the panel as well. Yes.